So my third question is, I want to talk about the process of negotiating with sponsors. We talked a little bit about sort of how to get to the right person to even have that conversation in the first place. So let me start with, how does a creator decide where to draw the line and what's non-negotiable? So let's say they come into it figuring, I'll just use a podcast example again. Like, I want to make X amount for the sponsorships of my podcast. The brand comes back and say, hey, we'd really like to do that. That's a little too much, or we want, this extra thing, or we want whatever. How do you think people should figure out what's non-negotiable? Where do you draw the line? How do you sort of set those parameters?
It's a great question. And man, so deal specific, honestly, because at the end of the day, the last thing that you want to have happen is they sign the deal and then they're super mad at you. It's just like, man, that person took us for all we're worth. They nickel and dimed us to death, or they were like super difficult. Because honestly, I think what a lot of folks don't understand is that how you behave throughout the negotiation process actually colors a lot of how the partnership will actually go down. Because so if you start this relationship off on this really sour footing, then they're going to be much more stringent on their feedback that they provide you, on the content that, that maybe it's a YouTube video, let's say, and you send them a draft of it to review, and they're going to be like, make these 50 changes. And you're just like, what the heck? Right. And versus if you really worked with them, you kind of went back and forth. It was a compromise. You kind of took a few things out here and there. So they just left the negotiating table feeling like this is a partner. This is someone who is not just a commodity, not a vendor. This is someone who can see ourselves working with long term. And so again, your point about being strategic, like instead of looking at this very transactionally, you have to think about, okay, this is not just the only deal I'm ever going to do. Hopefully, this is not the only deal I'm ever going to do with this partner. And so, like I said, every deal is going to be different. And so it's very situation specific. So let's say that they came to you and say, hey, we want to do, 20, podcast ad integrations or whatever. We want to do this many YouTube integrations or whatever it is. And the amount that they want, either the total amount that they want to pay you is not what you were hoping, or the per, asset price is not adequate. Rather than just coming down on your rate and they say, hey, we can only pay you 15 grand, but we still need, for this deal, you don't just say, okay, I really want to make it work. Because now you've set this really awful price precedent. It's going to be really hard to come back from. You say, hey, you know what? I totally understand. Like from a budget feasibility perspective, this is all you can do. I definitely want to make this work, but I can't do 20 reads. I can do 15 for 15K, right? So you have to pull something off the table. You can't just come down on your rate without any justification, right? And so I think, again, it's a matter of understanding, hey, we're going to get a little bit into the weeds here, but I think if you're the type of person who likes weeds, I think, so I'm going to go with this. Okay. There is this book that I really recommend. It's called Negotiation Genius by Deepak Malhotra. It's one of my favorite books on negotiation. And one concept that he discusses in there is called log rolling. Okay. And what log rolling is that whenever you enter a negotiation, each party basically almost always have multiple issues that they care about. Okay. So let's say that a brand is like really dead set on like, Josh, your ad read has to be 2 minutes long. Like it has to be to adequately showcase our product or whatever on YouTube, whatever it is. And you're like, I just don't do that. I do 30-second reads. That's what I do. And I'm focused on that. And I'm not going to, and they are like really dead set on this. And then meanwhile, over here on your side, your end, you are really fixated on only doing 10 ad reads, and when they really want you to do 20 or something like that, right? So you have these kind of competing interests that you may not give a crap about, and they really do. And same on their side, right? So it's like, so what log rolling is, you basically come to them and you say, look, I get that this 2-minute thing is like a really big deal to you. Okay. I will be willing to do a 1-minute read, or maybe you say, fine, I'll do the 2-minute read. We really do need to come down, and I'm only going to be able to do 10 reads. And meanwhile, they're over here not caring about how many reads really. But you really cared about that because you didn't want to saturate your audience. So the principle is basically you trade across issues. And so I think that's really an important thing to understand. It's very difficult to ascertain these things just through email. That's why I'm such a big advocate of like getting on a call, establishing the rapport, understanding, just asking them questions about what their goals are, objectives, all this stuff, so that you can start to have some of these like negotiating levers when you're trying to make some of these tough decisions.
Yeah, smart. So another question about negotiations is, what do you think are things that creators should ask for that most don't ask for?
Oh my goodness.
Because I think this is, and I'm sure there's a million of them, but I think this is the other part too, where, people think when they hear sponsorships and advertisers and all that, I feel like they think about money and they don't think about any of the other stuff, when really there's a million other factors that go into this, that things that could help them, that, you know, for example, right? Like, is your partner going to also promote your show? Like, if it's a big partner, we'll just use your example. If ConvertKit's going to send an email to ConvertKit subscribers about your new show, that's worth a lot of money in promotional value. So I'm curious, what are some things that you've noticed people don't ask for that they should?
So, you know, I'm an acronyms guy, obviously. Yeah. And so I've got one for you, Josh. It's called the do rule, okay? To get paid what you're due, by the way. And so this framework is very, very important when it comes to negotiations and pricing, because what most people do is they only focus on the D, which is the deliverables, right? What do you actually want me to do? Like an ad read on the podcast, YouTube video, whatever. That's basically all most people ask about, right? And honestly, it's understandable because a lot of brands and partners, that's all they reach out inquiring about. They said, hey, how much for one YouTube integration, or how much for one, podcast ad read? And then what creators do is they spit back a number. Oh, it's $1,000 or whatever. They don't ask any questions. They didn't do anything, right? Whereas there's these other two components in the do rule, the U and the E. So the U is the usage rights. What does that brand want to do with your work, your content, beyond you actually publishing on your platform? So whether this is, if it's a podcast, are they going to turn around and create an audiogram with this and post it on their website or their social? Maybe they want to run paid ads with it, right? Especially if it's like a video piece of content. Are they going to want to repurpose it in a bunch of interesting ways? And for how long are they going to do that? That's very critical. And you should be charging them for that, right? And then the E in the do rule is the exclusivity. A lot of creators don't think about this component, but a lot of brands will ask this and actually include it in the contract. And you may be signing this without realizing that you are basically committing to not talk about that companies, competitors for a certain duration. So, for example, ConvertKit did not do this, but if they did, it would take the form of like, you cannot talk about any other ESPs for 6 months. Right. Or whatever. I wouldn't just do it from an integrity perspective. Right. I wouldn't do that. But like a lot of brands, especially consumer focused brands, will make these asks. And it's actually, the onus is actually on you to ask about this. Don't just be surprised when you get the contract and be like, oh, I didn't know this was going to be in it. And then you go back and you have an egg on your face and you're like, I actually need more money for that. And let's actually pull that thread. That's actually a really common situation. And so the reason that is such a big issue is that your contact at the brand or the agency, when they've actually sent you the contract, right? The deal terms have been agreed to, the price, all that stuff. And you come back and be like, hold on a second, I need more money for these things you're asking. That person now has to go back to their boss or their client, if it's an agency, and be like, hey, I know I told you that everything was locked in with Josh, but it's actually not. He wants more money now. And so they look like an idiot. And that's the last thing you want. And so it's your job to ask all of these questions. What are all the deal terms? What are all the points? All this stuff, so that I can adequately provide you the right investment levels, right? Because again, you have to make your contact win in this scenario. So that's really those are the three main buckets that I think about when it comes to negotiating.
That's great. And I think also along those lines, it's important just to make sure, even at a base level, like again, using your ConvertKit example, for them to understand you're going to be the only sponsor, or you might have additional sponsors, or you're leaving it open. Because if you don't actually have that conversation up front, they might be thinking, yeah, we're going to be the only sponsor. Meanwhile, you're out there going, oh, I'm going to sell and bring in another sponsor. And it's like just the things that may seem obvious to you, expressing them and just making sure everybody's on the same page going into it, because it's easy to see how there could be confusion there.
Well, so much of it comes from misalignment of expectations, dude. Like so much of these issues. And the other thing about that real quickly is that a lot of creators are so concerned about asking these questions because they think it's going to scare away the partner. They're going to be like, I don't want to ask them all these things, because then they'll just be like, oh. And my answer to that is always good. Good. If it's gonna scare away someone who, these are reasonable questions, asking about usage, asking about exclusivity, asking about, a lot of brands will be like, oh, we just want to partner a couple posts and like, oh, it's organic and authentic. No, you need to tell me exactly what you want me to do, or else I can't price this. So yeah, it's really critical.
So to wrap up, the last thing I wanted to ask you on this sort of negotiation topic, and I'm actually going to tweak my question. I was going to ask you, what are the best ways to sort of counter a brand that you think is a perfect fit and they say no? But I want to sort of even back up a bit from that and say, at what point should you, if you make your pitch and they don't see it, they don't get it, they're not interested, they're like, it's not for us, should you even try to counter? Like, how hard should you push Or should you just go, you know what? They don't see it. I'm going to go elsewhere.
So I have a video on my YouTube channel actually called Why Brands Ghost Creators, 10 Reasons. So it's like literally a video about 10 reasons that brands ghost creators. And just like a small sampling is that the vast majority of the time, like people are busy, right? Like how many emails do you get, Josh? Like think about, put yourself in their shoes. This person, maybe it is the partnerships manager or the director of marketing. Maybe it's a smaller organization and they're handling everything, right? They're doing the print, they're doing broadcast, they're doing all these different things. They're doing their Google like pay-per-click ads, right? Like this person is doing a lot of things. And so when you email them that first time, because, them not responding is not because they hate you or not because you suck or not because your pitch sucked. Maybe your pitch sucks, but that's why you work. That's why you work with me. Right. But honestly, like, because they're super busy. And so it's like what I teach and my courses and my articles and videos and all this stuff is like literally a minimum of 4 follow-ups, even if you are not hearing from them. No, that's hard. It's like you're shouting into the void, like, hello. Like, listen to me, please pay attention to me. But it's like, no, like you have to actually follow up with, and by the way, the follow-up is not, just wanted to bring this to the top of your inbox, or just wanted to follow up, make sure you saw this. It's like, no, you need to say something different. Here's an article I saw on Digiday or Adweek about how, this other CPG brand over here is crushing it on with short form video or whatever. Thought your team might find this interesting. Would love to talk on Thursday at blah, blah, blah. It's like providing value, every interaction, providing value, because I can't tell you how many times this has happened over the years. We've been doing this so long, Josh, like it literally takes that 3rd, 4th email where, let me explain what happens. You email a brand. This is what happens. Okay. They get the email. They say, okay, I don't know who this person is, but it looks interesting. I'm going to actually maybe like forward this to my colleague because they might find it interesting. That's email 1, but they don't respond, right? Because they don't have an answer. Email number 2, you follow up and they say, oh, that's right. I need to get back to this person, but I still don't have the information. My boss still hasn't gotten back to me on this. So I'm just going to ignore it again. Right? The email 2. Email 3 is like, oh, okay, I really need to get back to this person. That's rude now. I'm going to respond. Oh yeah, tell me more. Let's talk. Like literally, this is what happens. I swear to you. Yeah. And so it's like, you have to, I know it's hard. I know you got to shove that imposter syndrome back in the box where you put it. And you just got to keep hitting send.
Yeah. Wow. This was awesome. Justin, this was amazing, incredibly valuable. I know people are going to love it.